and this is Wild Conversations. And this week's episode is talking about that annoying bird. Do you hear it? That sound is, in this case, a black-billed magpie, and that bird has been doing that outside our house for the better part of a week now, almost constantly. Surely a lot of you have that bird at your house too, and if you're not that person, you certainly know someone who would rather go ahead and get the gun out. Robert, that bird is back, it won't shut up, it's pounding on the house, it's making noise, I can't sleep. You know, whether you're trying to catch some extra winks of rest on a Saturday morning, or you know, whether you're trying to keep up your home and happy domain and that woodpecker is pounding on the shingles. There are all sorts of things that happen, especially around springtime, that make birds, in some cases, quite frustrating and yes, annoying. But what we hopefully do here today during our time is to open you up to some of the reasons why, and maybe give you a different perspective of how to look at those birds and what they're doing, because think about it, a lot of these species are traveling hundreds if not thousands of miles to get back to your yard, and they have one principal goal, and that is to find a mate, set up a territory, and have young, and to carry on the species. That is the highest order task at hand a lot of times here in spring. And so through that lens, hopefully we can see things, that jay, that gobbling turkey, the squeaking and squawking of chicks in a slightly different light. Because think about it, unlike our own species, a great many species of wildlife around the world, in fact most of them, have a breeding season, a period of usually only a few weeks where they have an opportunity to advance the species. And so if all of your sexual tension is condensed down into those 2 weeks, well, it can inspire quite a lot of interesting behavior. You know, it doesn't in humans enough, and we mate all year long, and we still do weird things because of it. But you hear a lot of these things going on during courting, during territory setup, and then feeding and taking care of chicks, or chicks being taken care of. And so, you know, the turkey, for instance, you know, that bird will gobble all morning long, and at the least provocation too. So obviously you hear a hen call. Tom will gobble, she clucks. He'll gobble. But even any random sound will cause these guys to sound off, like a slamming car door. Doom. You know, a dog bark. They'll gobble. It goes on and on and on constantly, it seems. So a lot of times, you know, a really common bird that shows up in our yards that is very vocal is the American robin. And as we approach the summer solstice, morning is getting earlier and earlier, and you're home from work on that weekend, wanting to sleep in, and that bird is right outside the window singing, singing, singing constantly. And so quite often a lot of these birds, whether it's blue jays or the magpies here that are calling right out beside the cottonwood grove I'm in, it really amps up the vocalizations. They're looking for mates, they're selecting mates. Mates are competing for usually females, multiple males competing for a female, and they're just making a lot of sound. They want to be noticed, so that's part of the thing. You know, look at a bar scene. Who's making the most noise? Well, the guy who wants to be in charge and wants to get noticed by the girls. And it's not so different for these other species. They have to find a mate. They have to settle down and select a spot to have those eggs and rear those young. You know, Canada geese are a great one to watch because they're very territorial, sort of like sandhill cranes. The males, in the case of the geese, the ganders, would be very territorial. You'll see them, the ones with the heads up first, and they're spotting danger, and they're announcing to their mate and anybody else. They'll start low first. that something's approaching. So some of these calls that are seemingly incessant and constant and in inconvenient times of the day, they can also be alarms. So if you have a neighbor cat or a dog or even a wild animal like a fox that comes through at a very regular interval of time each day, you may have an explosion of sound around that activity. So look and listen for that. And that's one of the things I hope to encourage you to do here is start looking into these things as a way to understand them and give you insight, because then it may change your perception of what's actually going on. We'll start out with just some examples. And one of the most frustrating for some homeowners is and are woodpeckers. Woodpeckers, interestingly, don't have a broadcast song like a lot of birds do. That American robin that's singing incessantly. All morning long, and you want to put that pillow over your head. They don't have that. What the woodpeckers have often is a drumming behavior. So instead of vocalizing, they will pound on something that resonates, that makes a lot of sound. And of course, a lot of times, man-made objects are just those things. They're perfect resonators. So you'll hear them pounding on gutters. You'll hear them pounding on downspouts. You'll hear them pounding on insulator boxes, on power poles. Some friends actually found this really cool pattern here in Yellowstone of little chips of paint being missing from the bottom edges of road signs. Look for that. I've seen it in a few cases where, in this case, a red-naped sapsucker would use the road sign as a drumming post. We've got some flickers here who use a power pole box as a drumming site, and it sounds almost a little bit like one of those phone ringtones from the UK. And it'll go on and on and on. And if that's your house, and especially if that's outside your bedroom, oh my gosh. In the case of our magpies here, use them as a bit of a case study. And use this approach to the creatures in your area too, but specifically with birds. Who's making the sound? Is it a male? Is it a female? Can you tell? In some cases, it's really difficult to tell a male from a female. You sometimes have to watch by behavior. But in other cases, of course, they're really brightly colored as males and more neutral and camouflaged as females. Is it a young one? Is it an old one? Because the young, and this is where a lot of people have difficulty with bird noise. It's when the chicks actually hatch. And as they start to mature, and they need lots of protein to grow and develop. They need lots of bugs. They need lots of carrion. These magpies are going to be extraordinarily boisterous. A lot of the corvids, especially crows, jays, magpies, nutcrackers, they are exceedingly vocal at times. In the case of there being a nest near your house or in your neighborhood, it can go on for a couple weeks until those birds fledge, and even after they fledge. So while they're in the nest, you may hear especially as the adults are approaching. They see the adults in the vicinity and they just want the food. And it goes on and on and on, and you wish you could put a sock over all of them. So in the case of crows and ravens, you can tell if you hear that call, when you hear that, look in their mouth. If you can get a view with a set of binoculars, or if they're close enough, if the lining of the mouth is red, you're looking at a juvenile. And so when you get into a situation like that, as frustrating as it can be, I encourage you to start paying more attention. Look at it. Look, who is it? Is it that male or female? Is it a juvenile or an adult? Where are they doing it? In the case of the magpies here, a lot of this is focused right around this little cottonwood grove that I'm sitting in. And there is a nest site here. They've used it on and off over the years. There's another nest site on the north side of the house. There's some further down the creek here. And so being aware of where they're doing it, okay, when are they doing it? This bird has been going on and off. I timed it the other day. I just started timing the intervals between these calls, and literally it was a call every half second to 7 seconds for over an hour on end. It was like you've been hearing here, almost constantly, but not always throughout the day. So there are definitely times where the bird would quiet down. What's going on? It may give you some real interesting insights as to what's happening. Maybe they have another nest site like ours do, I think, downstream along the creek here. Maybe that's when there's a predator in the area and you want to see that goshawk that you've heard about in your neighborhood but never seen yourself, or the sharpshin or Cooper's hawk. The actual time windows that they are calling can be very important. Now, obviously, when they're setting up territories, it's going to be largely in the mornings. That's when the air is calm. That's when sound travels best. They're most active. They're getting going after a long night's sleep on the roost. So most songs and vocalizations are going to take place in the morning. But pay attention. You may see another pulse toward nighttime. So who's doing the call? Where are they doing the call? When are they doing the calls or the behavior? And then ultimately, hopefully that'll begin to clue us into what that means. Is it nest selection? Is it courtship and pair bonding? These two magpies getting together. I did see while I was out on the porch, the one that's been making this incessant call, it's an adult because it had iridescent feathers. Ooh, one of the magpies just landed right up above me here in the juniper. And it was approaching another adult, fluttering its wings and making that call. So I need to do a little bit of research, and you may need to do the same. Is this purely courtship? Is this courtship specific to a nest selection site? Is this courtship specific to territory establishment? I don't know. In this case, I've got to do some homework, do a little reading. Don't be afraid of the books. That magpie's getting closer. The other one's hopping around in the branches here, still staying below the other one. And that one, as it's calling, is lifting its tail and lowering its head. So hopefully with time, if they don't become more palatable to you, at least you'll understand a little bit better why they're doing what they're doing. They have this very narrow window of time to foster the next generation. There's a very narrow window of time where food is available and nest sites are available, and there's intense competition for nest sites and mates and territories. They're approaching the nest. And it's starting in with these whisper calls, these kind of whining little chirps and warbles. And so in the end, you may come to appreciate them more. You may weave them into your daily life and make them a fixture in your yard, around your home, and miss them when they're gone. Think about it. The entire rest of the year, you hear very little out of a lot of these birds. And then this burst of activity around the mating season. And know that if they're really hassling you or they're too annoying, that this too shall pass. It'll pass with the mating season. But knowing that this is a sign of vitality and richness and life carrying forward in a real positive way around your home. It's a good sign that your home is a safe place, a productive place, and a good place to raise kids. It might not be your home if you thought otherwise. So enjoy these birds and let us know what you find. My name is George Buman. This is Wild Conversations, and please log on to a Yellowstone Life and download our free 5 things you can do right now to tune in to animal language. Subscribe down below if you're tuning in via YouTube, and definitely like us on Facebook, and there will be more to come. Join us next week, Thursday, at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for more Wild Conversations.